Hello there, Section 14. I hope you are well today on a very cold and windy April 19th. I don't know if spring's going to come. It looks like we have another week of highs in the 30s and 40s, lows in the 20s, all the way out to Monday, Tuesday night. And I'm looking for my personal loons, even though the water is halfway off my lake. I don't see them yet. They always come back to the same lake every year, and mine are darn near tame. And comment on that just a little bit. You know, today at CLC for my live classes, I spun into a kind of a melancholy rumination. I was walking up to the college, and my thought was, on that distant afternoon when I'm gone, someday I got to retire. You can't teach forever. Nothing gold can stay. Nothing lasts forever. This isn't our real home, and I'm going to get to my new one someday. My thought was, jeepers, when I'm no longer at the college, who's going to bring me everybody to Shakespeare? Who's going to host poets? Who's going to run the medallion hunt? Who will teach all of my classes? Who will run Verse Like Water, etc.? Well, I have no idea. Probably by the time I'm ready to get out of there, the college is going to be completely quiet, because eventually, if it keeps going, we're going to be a virtual college. I think I already told you that. When I came there over a decade ago, 1 in 10 classes was online. Now it's crowding 3.5 in 10, 35%. So maybe all these questions I'm fretting about are unnecessary acts. I had a fantastic day yesterday. Quickly on the heels of hosting Maya C. Pope at the college, I was at the Guthrie. I got 80 kids there. We saw an absolutely superb production of Hamlet with no political agenda whatsoever. They just played the play as it is. And I was, at the end, I was on my feet just bawling because I was so overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. Not the sadness of the play. I know the plot. I've taught it before, years ago. I knew the stage would be littered with bodies at the end. I know everybody gets it, except Horatio. And it was really just the idea of Shakespeare, the mere idea of Shakespeare, who is a vast metaphor to me. And I just had so much fun getting kids to Shakespeare. And next year I'm going to order 200 tickets. This year I ordered 100, and we used most of them. And just here's a shot of the Guthrie, so you can see the groovy light that was in there when we arrived. And for all you Pine River Bacchus kids, here's your actual favorite English teacher, my former student and current friend and colleague, Greg Gentry. I love this man, and I gave him we just fell into each other's arms hugging yesterday when he arrived at the Guthrie. And like I said on my Facebook post that I used for this photograph, I've got my arm around the future here. Although I'm still going to, running around with cunning and vigor. So my next final big project of the year is Kevin Young on April 28th. Getting very busy on getting ready for that, and be sure great to see you at that poetry reading. He's reading at Pillager too. That's where I'll reunite with Greg Gentry for the last time this year. And he will be returning to his high school of origin as a triumphant English teacher. I'm so proud to have been his teacher, and so proud to be his friend and watch his career take off. I ain't his manner, believe me, but we do talk. And men like him, women like him don't need mentors. Sorry, I got gender confused. I have when I was in Staples today, you're going to have 2 lessons this week, and you should have 3 next week. So I didn't do Staples Tuesday because we were all at the Guthrie, and that meant some of the class today was about debriefing. But you'll have 1 more lesson. I'm going back up to Staples tomorrow. Today it was virtual with my camera. So you'll have 2 lessons from me this week and 3 next week because Kevin Young wants a car service. And I may talk about that and I may not. Maybe I said he wants a driver that's triple vaxxed and that's going to wear a mask. And that does not describe me. Here at the, what we might call the tail end of the pandemic. Hopefully the tail end of the pandemic. Excuse me. I want to read you, I know I've already read you a poem by Mark Strand, and I'm going to read you another poem by Mark Strand, and it won't take very much setup. It's brief, so if I'm wearing you out with poetry, if you're getting all versed out, I'll try to make sure that the poems are on the short side, the brief side, for our final video lessons across the next 2.5 weeks, whatever we got left. Losing track as to what week this is. Then I got to breach a very serious subject, which is the idea of racism in literature. I'm not saying exactly that we have racism in literature, but we have a portrayal of a character in The Great Gatsby that has always given me pause. And I'll repeat the idea. It's not an easy subject to talk about, but there's topics in classes that need to be approached with caution and love and patience and grace and wonder and maybe historical affection. Let's put it that way. With so many centuries we've been trying to figure things out, and we are. Some days I feel like we're making it as a species. Sometimes I feel like we're going nowhere. And I think my Staples kids found this relatively interesting. And I hope this sounds like a day for you. I'm 5 minutes in. I'm hoping to keep this under 25 minutes. Well under. Mark Strand, The Weather of Words. There's a chapter in this book. This is his Weather of Words. It's a poetics. It's not necessarily a book of poetry. Poetics means every poet writes one. It's kind of their theory of poetry, their way of helping poetry along, maybe even helping younger poets. And I don't read a lot of them, although I have a lot of them. Why would you read poetics when you can read poetry? Anyway, it's about the strangeness of family photographs, this chapter. And there's a poem about a photograph in the chapter. He's trying to illustrate something. Is this him? I gotta make sure this is a Mark Strand poem. No, this is Charles Wright. Fine. Bar Jamaica, 1959 to 60. Grace is the focal point, the tip ends of her loosed hair, like match fire in the backlight, her hands in a "here's the church," ... She's looking at Ugo Mulas, who's looking at us. Ingrid is writing this all down and glances up and stares hard. This still isn't clear. I'm looking at Grace and Goldstein and Borsuk and Dick Venezia are looking at me. Yola keeps reading her book, and that leaves the rest of them. Susan and Elena and Carl Glass and Thorpe and Schimmel and June Gates and Hobart and Schneeman. One afternoon in Milan in the late spring. Then Ugo finishes, drinks a coffee, and everyone goes away. Summer arrives and winter. The snow falls and no one comes back ever again. All of them gone through the star filter of memory with its small gravel and metal tables and passers-by. Charles Wright, as cited by Mark Strand. All right, difficult subject time, if you'd permit me. I don't know if I've said this to you yet, but one of the ways, there's many ways for me to think about literature. Like, one of my favorite metaphors is the metaphor of a vast estate, man. Like, literature is a vast estate, and all the poets I'm bringing are among the owner-operators. And in this metaphor, in this analogy, so to speak, I'm a gardener. I always think of myself as a gardener, just kind of, trimming the hedges and planting flowers, and because I am a writer and I am a poet, but I think of myself as a keeper of that garden, and I commit myself to the owner of that garden, all the owners. But a more probably a metaphor that's not as pleasant, not as poetic, is to think about literature as an institution, and I've been serving it long enough to know about it. Institutions can be wonderful. Institutions historically have problems. One of the problems can be misogyny, which is the hatred of women, the marginalization and the harm that's done to women. You could call that chauvinism too, but misogyny is kind of the technical word for that. And I don't know if we'll cover that in this unit. Probably should talk about portrayals of Daisy a little bit. But another problem in literature, I'm not saying that exactly that's the problem here, is, well, I kind of am actually. Racism is another problem in literature. The idea of different ethnic peoples getting along and having trouble getting along is an old story, but let's face a few facts here. We have a man in this story named Myron Wolfsheim, who's a Jew. and he is not characterized very positively. He's old. He's not very attractive. He's splotchy, right? And he's got like nose hairs boinging out of his nose, kind of like me. Probably fertilizes him, kind of like me. And there's worse things. I don't know if you know this, but in the olden days, like my dad, I remember he had these suits and he had like sport coats like I wear. He was an insurance salesman. And the modern sport coat tends to come with buttons along the sleeve. But in the olden days, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, all the way out to me being a little kid, I could remember this. Men typically had cufflinks. And I think you could switch the cufflinks out. You'd put it in the slot and you'd flip it. And they could be decorative. And maybe it was a way of making you feel like you had a bunch of different jackets when you only had a few. Well, I've always found it disturbing that Myram Wolfsheim has cufflinks made out of human molars. That is a rough image, okay? And on top of all of this, Myram Wolfsheim is a straightforward criminal. He was involved with the Black Sox scandal of 1919. And there's F. Scott Fitzgerald blurring a little bit of the real into this 1925 novel, I think mid-20s. The Black Sox scandal happened. That was the year that the White Sox threw the World Series so they could make some money, and they did it with gambling. And there was a huge trial, and I cannot overstate how heartbroken this country was over that, because baseball has always been our #1 game, not football. Not football. Baseball has always been the national pastime, as we call it. And Wolfsheim was involved in that. So why does this matter? It matters because he's not Norwegian, okay? He's Jewish. So what is going on here is, I'm not saying anything directly, I'm just putting before you possibilities of reading, possible readings. A possible gloss is that, wow, F. Scott Fitzgerald might have been anti-Semitic. He might not have liked Jews very much. I don't know that that's true. Maybe it was just some character plucked from his real life. Maybe it was just imagined. Maybe he just chose the idea of him being Jewish as random. But this is going to come back in the novel when Nick Carraway goes to try to talk Wolfsheim into, well, you might not be at that part yet, and I don't want to wreck it. There's little bits of Judaism mixed in with this in the same way that there's little bits of Catholicism mixed in here. Fitzgerald was raised Catholic like me, walked on the church at the age of 18 like most people do. And he kept moving. And St. Paul had to forgive him for never looking back. But we have a history here that is troubling. Literature has been very hard on the Jews, and forgive me for getting a little bit historical right now. I think some of this can be attributed, maybe the beginning of it, in some people's minds, not mine, is the idea that it was the Jews who crucified Christ. Now, my church has had some bad ideas, but that's not one of them, okay? Yes, my church has had bad ideas. We set people on fire during the Spanish Inquisition. Not good. But at no time has my church taught that we should malign the Jews in public or in private, in real or imaginary ways, because it was their fault. That's never been part of church teaching. I just got to clear myself on this one. Clear the people that I go to Mass with every week. In general, the thinking is every one of us is a sinner. Every one of us was pounding those nails. So that doesn't feel right to me. Although a number of world-class writers might have had that in mind as they made their stories. And let's turn a few pages of history right now, and I'll give you some highlights. And I could go a lot longer on this one. I'll give you some solid examples, in addition to Fitzgerald. We have the example of Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote a very troubling story. One of his Canterbury Tales is called The Prioress Tale. That one is rough, and I wrote a very large paper about that in my swerve year when I was back in grad school around my 50th birthday. And I presented it at a conference of medievalists because the story bugged me so much. How's this for a depiction of a Jew? It is about a little boy, a little Catholic boy. 1300s is when it was written. And he's just walking to church one day. And while he's walking, he is singing quietly a hymn to himself called the Alma Redemptoris Mater, which means, O Redeeming Mother. Well, a Jewish guy comes out of the ghetto that he lives in, and he sees the boy singing the song, and he gets enraged, and he takes a knife, grabs the kid, takes the kid to a sewer and cuts his throat, cuts his windpipe, and throws him into the sewer. Well, via a miracle, that little boy is still alive all night long. He sings, he keeps singing the Alma Redemptoris Mater. And it has a very strange ending that ends up with like this pearl on his tongue or whatever, but his family eventually comes to find him, and boy, did they go get that Jew. What was Chaucer thinking? What the actual heck was he thinking? Or was he racist? Was he anti-Semitic? There was wholesale persecution of the Jews in the 1300s and 1400s, as well as in England. They were cast out of England, I think in the late 1500s. And let's go to England, okay, for a second example. Shakespeare had a rival. I don't know if you know this. His name was Christopher Marlowe, who thought he was going to be the next Shakespeare. He wasn't even within striking range. I've read his plays, and they're not even close. Christopher Marlowe, how's this for a charming plot? He wrote a story called The Jew of Malta. My wife is starting up a shower. You might hear water flowing. The Jew of Malta. How's this for a nice story? The Jew of Malta. I haven't even read it because I think Marlowe kind of sucks. Why would you read Christopher Marlowe when you can read Shakespeare? But The Jew of Malta, at least the plot, is about a Jewish guy who poisons a well and kills a whole bunch of nuns. Okay, I don't even know how it goes. That's all I know. That's just the gist of it. And then Shakespeare sees this happen, and he figures he's got to maybe take a shot at writing his own story. Shakespeare, who most certainly saw, historically, a Jew drawn and quartered in downtown London because it was suspected that Jewish guy had taken a shot at poisoning the Queen. Well, Shakespeare then writes a story called The Merchant of Venice. And The Merchant of Venice is about this guy who is broke, right? And he wants to take out this girl. But he doesn't have any money, so how can you ask out someone to dinner if you don't have any money? So he goes to a Jew named Shylock, who's a merchant. And there's that stereotype again, right? That writers just mess with us. Jews are known as being really good with money, in addition to being historically hilarious. And Shylock says, okay, look, I'll loan you the money, but you got to pay me on the day that we agree. And if you don't pay me on that date, I'm going to take a pound of flesh. And the guy thinks he's speaking metaphorically, and he's like, okay, that's fine, I agree. Well, you know where this goes. Of course he doesn't pay him back the money. And at the end of the play, I know this isn't a knife, it's implied. At the end of the play, Shylock shows up in the courtroom with a knife because he wants a pound of flesh cut out of the guy's butt. That is rough. And a good thing Portia saves him. And my wife's shower is getting louder. 17 minutes is enough of a video. And I just wanted to let you know that literature can be racist, literature can be misogynist, literature can be chauvinistic. And I don't know if it's the writer, I don't know if it's the characters, or if these poets, who I expect better from, are sort of, as I said before, messing with us, making us maybe confront our own shortcomings, our own biases, maybe confront our own racism. You know, I'll leave it right there. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'm at the 18-minute mark, and this is plenty good. I'll give you another video tomorrow, and it's going to be even better. Stay well, stay warm. Try to keep an even keel. Finals week is rough. The 2/3 of the work is done in the last third of every course at CLC, and that's only true of my Comp 2 classes. I got a Comp 2 research paper set of projects coming in Monday, and I'm a little nervous. I've never seen Comp 2s more behind. I love those kids, but jeepers, they are trying to pull a hat out. Farewell. Love you guys.